The blizzard had teeth that winter of 1887, and Harrison Ingram could barely see his own gloved hand in front of his face as he urged his stallion forward through the white hell of the Colorado mountains. He had been riding hard from Randsburg, a small mining town nestled in the San Juan Mountains, carrying urgent medical supplies to a homestead 20 miles north, when the storm hit with a fury that seemed to come straight from the devil himself. The wind howled like wounded wolves, and the snow came down so thick it was like riding through a solid wall of white. Harrison knew he should find shelter, but out here there was nothing but wilderness and the unforgiving cold that could kill a man in minutes if he stopped moving. His horse whinnied, suddenly rearing back, and Harrison fought to control the animal. The stallion would not move forward no matter how much he urged it, stamping and snorting clouds of vapor into the freezing air. Harrison dismounted, his boots sinking deep into the snow, and immediately understood why his horse had balked. There was something dark against the white just ahead, a shape that did not belong to the natural landscape. He stumbled forward, leading his reluctant horse, and his heart nearly stopped when he realized what he was looking at. It was a hand, pale and delicate, reaching up from a snowdrift as if grasping for salvation that had not come. Harrison dropped to his knees and began digging frantically with his bare hands, his gloves abandoned in his desperate need for speed. The snow was packed tight around the body, and he had to work carefully to avoid injuring whoever lay beneath. It was a woman, and she was unconscious but somehow still breathing, her lips blue with cold and her skin like ice beneath his touch. She wore a thin traveling dress that was completely inadequate for this weather, and her dark hair was frozen in strands around her face. Harrison knew he had only minutes to save her life. The homestead he had been heading toward was still miles away, impossible to reach in these conditions. He needed shelter now. He remembered a lined shack he had passed about a mile back, a small cabin that trappers used during the season. It was their only chance. Harrison wrapped the woman in his heavy coat and lifted her onto his horse before mounting behind her, holding her against his chest as he turned the stallion back the way they had come. The ride was agonizing, every minute feeling like an hour as he strained to see through the blinding snow, praying he had not missed the shack. By some miracle, or perhaps just stubborn determination, Harrison found the cabin. It was barely more than 4 walls and a roof, but it had a stone fireplace and a door that shut against the wind. He carried the woman inside and laid her on the single wooden bunk while he worked to start a fire. His hands shook from cold and urgency as he struck the flint again and again, until finally a spark caught in the dry kindling he had found stacked beside the hearth. Once the fire was blazing, Harrison turned his full attention to the woman. He knew he had to get her out of her wet clothes, or she would die of exposure even with the fire. His face burned with embarrassment at the impropriety, but there was no choice. He worked quickly and clinically, removing her frozen garments and wrapping her in the 2 wool blankets he found in a chest by the wall. Then he stripped off his own wet shirt and lay down beside her, using his body heat to warm her as the fire slowly filled the small space with blessed warmth. She did not stir for hours. Harrison held her close, feeling the terrible coldness of her skin gradually warming against his. He talked to her even though she could not hear him, telling her she was safe now, that she was going to be all right, that she just needed to hold on. The storm raged outside, shaking the cabin walls, but inside the fire crackled and the temperature slowly climbed above freezing. It was near dawn when her eyelids finally fluttered. Harrison felt her stir in his arms and immediately pulled back to give her space, though he stayed close in case she needed him. Her eyes opened slowly, confused and unfocused at first, and then they locked on his face with sudden clarity and fear. "Easy now," Harrison said gently, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "You are safe. I found you buried in the snow. You were nearly frozen to death." The woman looked around the cabin, taking in the rough walls, the fire, the blankets wrapped around her. Her hand moved to her throat and then lower, and she seemed to realize she was not wearing her own clothes. Color flooded her pale cheeks. "I had to get you warm," Harrison explained quickly, his own face heating. "Your dress was soaked through. I did not. I was respectful, I give you my word." She studied his face for a long moment, and whatever she saw there must have reassured her because some of the tension left her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse and barely audible. "You saved my life." "What were you doing out there?" Harrison asked. "In this storm, dressed like that? You could have died." Tears welled in her eyes and she looked away toward the fire. "I was trying to get away from from someone who meant me harm. I had a horse, but she threw me when the storm hit. I tried to walk, but I could not see anything. I must have fallen into that drift and just given up." Harrison felt a surge of protective anger at the thought of someone hurting this woman. "Who was he? Where did you come from?" "Leadville," she said quietly. "I worked in a saloon there serving drinks. The owner, he decided I should do more than serve, if you understand my meaning. When I refused, he became violent. I ran. I took what little money I had saved and ran. I thought I could make it to Randsburg. I heard there was a respectable boarding house there, that they needed a cook. But I did not count on the storm." She turned back to look at him, and Harrison was struck by the deep brown of her eyes like rich earth after rain. "I have nowhere else," she said simply. "No family, no money now, nothing. I lost everything when I lost the horse." Something in Harrison's chest tightened at those words. The vulnerability in her voice, the quiet desperation, touched something deep inside him that he had thought long buried. "What is your name?" he asked. "Diana," she said. "Diana Owens." "Harrison Ingram," he replied. "And you are not alone anymore, Diana. Once this storm breaks, I will take you to Randsburg. We will find you that position at the boarding house, and if they will not have you, then we will find something else. You have my word on that." Tears spilled down her cheeks and she quickly wiped them away. "Why would you help me? You do not know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Harrison said simply, "and because no one deserves to die alone in the snow." The storm lasted 2 more days, trapping them in the lined shack together. Harrison gave Diana his spare shirt to wear, and her dress dried slowly by the fire. They had only the small amount of food Harrison carried in his saddlebags, which they rationed carefully, and water from melted snow. The close quarters and the enforced intimacy of their situation could have been awkward, but instead something unexpected bloomed between them. They talked. Harrison told Diana about his life, about growing up on a ranch in Texas, before heading north to Colorado to try his hand at ranching in the mountains. He had a small spread just outside Randsburg, nothing fancy, but it was his, earned with sweat and determination. He raised cattle and broke horses, made enough to live on and put a little away each year. Diana told him about her life too, about growing up in an orphanage in Kansas City, about the constant struggle to survive after she aged out at 16 with no skills and no prospects. She had worked as a seamstress, a laundress, a shop girl, always scraping by. The job in Leadville had seemed like a blessing at first, good pay and a clean place to sleep. She had not realized what would be expected of her until it was almost too late. "I am not educated," she said on the second night, staring into the fire. "I can read and write, but just barely. I can cook, though, and clean and work hard. I am not afraid of hard work." "I can see that," Harrison said. He had watched the way she carried herself, the quiet dignity even in her desperate situation. You have strength in you, Diana. Not many people could have survived what you went through." She looked at him with those deep brown eyes, and Harrison felt something shift inside him. He had been alone for a long time, married to his work and his land, telling himself he did not need anything more. But sitting here in this cabin with this woman who had literally been buried by life and yet still kept going, he felt the walls he had built around his heart beginning to crack. "Why did you never marry?" Diana asked softly. "A man like you with property and an honest living, you must have had opportunities." Harrison was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I suppose I never found the right person," he said finally. "Most of the women in Randsburg are already spoken for, and the few who are not. Well, we just did not suit. I always thought maybe someday, but someday never seemed to come." "How old are you?" Diana asked. 28, Harrison replied. "And you?" 22, she said. "I feel older sometimes, like I have lived much more than my years." "I understand that feeling," Harrison said. On the morning of the third day, the storm finally broke. Harrison woke to sunlight streaming through the gaps in the cabin walls, bright and almost blinding after the days of gray. Diana was still asleep on the bunk, and he took a moment to just look at her. Her dark hair had dried into soft waves around her face, and in sleep she looked younger, more peaceful. She was beautiful, he realized, though it was not just her physical appearance that drew him. It was her spirit, her resilience, the way she faced her circumstances with quiet courage. He stepped outside to check on his horse and survey the situation. The snow was deep, over 3 feet in most places, but the sky was clear and blue. They could travel if they took it slow. Harrison brought his horse around to the front of the cabin and secured his saddlebags, then went back inside to wake Diana. She stirred when he touched her shoulder gently. "The storm has passed," he said. "We can head to Randsburg today if you feel strong enough." Diana sat up, clutching the blankets around her. "I am strong enough," she said with determination. "I want to keep moving forward." They prepared to leave, and Harrison helped Diana into her now dry dress. He politely turned his back while she changed, though he was acutely aware of every rustle of fabric behind him. When she was ready, they extinguished the fire and left the cabin as they had found it, ready for the next traveler who might need shelter. The ride to Randsburg was long and cold, but the sun was warm on their faces and the worst was behind them. Diana sat in front of Harrison on the horse, and he kept his arms around her to keep her steady and share warmth. She fit perfectly against him, and he found himself hyper-aware of every place their bodies touched. They talked as they rode, their conversation flowing easily like they had known each other for years instead of days. Harrison pointed out landmarks and told her about the town they were heading toward. Randsburg was small, maybe 200 people, but it was growing. There was a general store, a church, a school, 2 saloons, and the boarding house Diana had mentioned. It was run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson, a formidable woman but fair. "You think she will give me a chance?" Diana asked nervously. "I will make sure of it," Harrison promised. "Mrs. Patterson owes me a favor. I helped her son out of some trouble last year. She will listen to me." They reached Randsburg in the late afternoon, riding down the main street as people stopped to stare. Harrison was well known in town, and the sight of him with a strange woman on his horse was bound to cause talk. He ignored the curious looks and rode straight to the boarding house, a 2-story white building at the end of the street. Mrs. Patterson came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a tall woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Harrison Ingram, what on earth have you got there?" Harrison dismounted and then carefully helped Diana down. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Miss Diana Owens. I found her nearly frozen to death in the mountains during the storm. She was traveling here looking for work. I believe you mentioned needing help in your kitchen. Mrs. Patterson's sharp eyes raked over Diana, taking in her worn dress and exhausted face. Did I now? She was quiet for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. Well, I suppose I could use an extra pair of hands. Can you cook, girl? Yes, madam, Diana said, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. I can cook and clean and do laundry. I am a hard worker and I am honest. I will not steal from you or cause trouble. Good to know, Mrs. Patterson said dryly. Room and board plus $2 a week. You will share a room with my other girl, Mary. Work starts at 5 in the morning. Sundays you get the afternoon off for church and rest. No men in your room, no drinking, no smoking. You break my rules, you are out. Understood? Yes, madam, Diana said, relief flooding her face. Thank you, madam, I will not disappoint you. Mrs. Patterson nodded and then turned her attention to Harrison. You vouching for her? I am, Harrison said firmly. She is a good woman who fell on hard times. She deserves a chance. All right then, Mrs. Patterson said. Come on, girl. Let me show you where you will be staying. You look like you could use a hot meal and a proper bed. Diana turned to Harrison, her eyes shining with gratitude. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. You saved my life and you gave me a future. I do not know how I can ever repay you. No repayment needed, Harrison said, though his chest felt tight at the thought of watching her walk away. You just take care of yourself, Diana. And if you need anything, my ranch is just 3 miles north of town. Anyone can tell you how to find it. She smiled at him, a real smile that lit up her whole face, and Harrison felt his heart skip a beat. Then Mrs. Patterson was ushering her inside, and she was gone. Harrison stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door, feeling oddly bereft. He remounted his horse and rode home to his ranch, but his mind was full of Diana. He thought about her that night as he did his chores, as he ate his solitary dinner, as he lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. He had known her for only 3 days, but somehow she had burrowed into his heart and made a home there. The next morning, Harrison told himself he had work to do, fences to mend and animals to tend. He had no business riding into town. But by noon, he found himself saddling his horse anyway, making up excuses about needing supplies from the general store. He rode into Randsburg and tied his horse outside the store, then found himself walking past it toward the boarding house. Diana was in the side garden, hanging laundry on the line. Her sleeves were rolled up and her face was flushed from work, and Harrison thought she had never looked more beautiful. She saw him and smiled, that same bright smile from yesterday, and came over to the fence. Harrison, she said warmly. I did not expect to see you so soon. I had business in town, he said, which was not entirely a lie. I thought I would check on you, make sure you are settling in all right. Mrs. Patterson is strict but kind, Diana said. She gave me 3 dresses that belong to her daughter, and the work is hard but honest. I like the other girl, Mary. She has been here for 2 years and knows the routine. I think I am going to be happy here. I am glad, Harrison said, and he meant it, even though part of him wished she needed him still. You deserve happiness, Diana. They talked for a few minutes more, and then Mrs. Patterson called for Diana from inside the house. I have to go, Diana said reluctantly. But thank you for stopping by. It means a lot to me. Harrison tipped his hat and watched her hurry back inside. He rode home feeling lighter somehow, just from those few minutes in her presence. It became a pattern. Harrison found reasons to come to town 2 or 3 times a week, and he always stopped to talk to Diana. Sometimes it was just for a few minutes, sometimes longer if she had a break from her work. They talked about everything and nothing, shared stories and dreams, and with each conversation Harrison fell a little more in love with her. Diana seemed to look forward to his visits too. Her face would light up when she saw him, and she would find excuses to step outside even if she was in the middle of something. Mrs. Patterson noticed, of course. The woman noticed everything, but she did not say anything, just watched them with those sharp eyes of hers. Winter slowly gave way to early spring. The snow began to melt, and the first green shoots appeared in the mountain meadows. Harrison invited Diana to attend the town social, a dance held in the church hall on the first Saturday of every month. She hesitated, worried about what people would think, but Harrison assured her that everyone would welcome her. She was part of the community now. The night of the dance, Harrison dressed in his best clothes and rode into town with his heart pounding like he was a nervous boy instead of a grown man. He went to the boarding house to collect Diana, and when she came down the stairs, he forgot how to breathe. She wore one of the dresses Mrs. Patterson had given her, a deep blue that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes, and her dark hair was pinned up with small white flowers. "You look beautiful," Harrison said, his voice rough with emotion. Diana blushed and smiled. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." They walked to the church hall together, and Harrison was acutely aware of the way Diana's hand rested in the crook of his arm. The hall was already crowded with people, and a small band was playing fiddle music in the corner. Harrison introduced Diana to everyone, and she charmed them all with her quiet grace and warm smile. When the dancing started, Harrison led Diana onto the floor. He was not a particularly skilled dancer, but Diana did not seem to mind. They swayed together to the music, and Harrison thought he had never been happier than in this moment with this woman in his arms. "I am glad you convinced me to come," Diana said softly. "I have not been to a dance since I was a girl in the orphanage. They used to let us have a party once a year, and we would dance with each other and pretend we were fancy ladies at a ball." "You are fancier than any lady I have ever met," Harrison said, and he meant it. Diana had a refinement that had nothing to do with education or breeding and everything to do with the goodness of her heart. They danced several more dances, and then Harrison led her outside for some air. The night was cool but pleasant, and the stars were brilliant overhead. They walked a little ways from the hall, finding a quiet spot under a cottonwood tree. "Diana," Harrison said, suddenly nervous in a way he had never been in his life, "I need to tell you something. I have been thinking about this for weeks, trying to find the right words, but there are no right words. There is just the truth." Diana turned to face him, her expression serious. "What is it?" "I am in love with you," Harrison said simply. "I think I have been since the moment I found you in that snowdrift, but it has grown every day since. I love your strength and your kindness and your courage. I love the way you smile and the way you see the good in everything. I love talking to you and being near you. I know it has only been a few months, and I know you may not feel the same way, but I had to tell you. I could not keep it inside anymore." Diana's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Oh, Harrison," she whispered, "I love you too. I was afraid to say it, afraid to even hope, but I have loved you for so long. You gave me everything, my life and my hope and my future, and then you gave me your heart too. How could I not love you?" Harrison cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Diana breathed. "Please." Harrison lowered his head and kissed her, soft and gentle at first, then deeper as Diana's arms came up around his neck. It was like coming home, like finding the missing piece of himself he had not even known he was looking for. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast, but I do not want to wait. I want to build a life with you, Diana. I want to wake up next to you every morning and go to sleep beside you every night. I want to share everything with you. Will you be my wife?" "Yes," Diana said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Harrison, I will marry you. Nothing would make me happier." They sealed their engagement with another kiss and then walked back to the dance hand in hand to share their news. The townspeople of Randsburg were delighted, already fond of Diana and happy to see Harrison finally settling down. Mrs. Patterson actually smiled, which Harrison had rarely seen, and told Diana she would make the wedding cake herself. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Randsburg. Diana wore a simple white dress that the women of the town helped her sew, and she carried wildflowers from the mountain meadows. Harrison wore his best suit and could not stop smiling as he watched his bride walk down the aisle toward him. The ceremony was short and sweet, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Harrison kissed Diana with all the love in his heart. The whole town turned out for the celebration afterward. There was food and music and dancing, and Harrison and Diana were the center of it all, glowing with happiness. As the sun began to set, Harrison lifted Diana onto his horse and they rode out to his ranch, their ranch now, to begin their new life together. The ranch house was small but sturdy, 2 rooms and a loft, with a good stone fireplace and windows that looked out over the mountains. Harrison carried Diana over the threshold, making her laugh, and then set her down gently in the middle of their home. "It is not much," he said, suddenly nervous, "but it is ours. We can add on as we need to make it bigger and better." "It is perfect," Diana said, looking around with shining eyes. "It is a home, Harrison, our home. That is all I need." That night they consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies and hearts. Harrison was gentle with Diana, mindful that this was all new to her, and she responded with a sweetness that took his breath away. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, Diana's head on Harrison's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I never knew it could be like this," Diana whispered. "I never knew I could be this happy." "Neither did I," Harrison said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "You have given me everything, Diana. You are my whole world." They settled into married life with an ease that felt natural and right. Diana threw herself into making the ranch house a real home, sewing curtains for the windows and planting a vegetable garden out back. She cooked meals that made Harrison groan with pleasure, and she kept the house cleaner than it had ever been in the years he had lived there alone. But Diana was not content to just keep house. She wanted to help with the ranch work too, and Harrison taught her how to tend the cattle and care for the horses. She had a natural way with animals, patient and gentle, and the horses responded to her touch. Harrison loved working alongside his wife, their hands sometimes brushing as they worked, stealing kisses when they thought no one was watching. Summer came in full force, hot and bright, and the ranch thrived under their joint care. Harrison had never worked so hard or been so happy. Every night he came home to Diana, to her smile and her cooking and her love, and he thanked God for the blizzard that had brought her into his life. In August, Diana came to Harrison with news that made his heart nearly burst with joy. She was pregnant, due in early spring. Harrison swept her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. "We are going to be parents," Diana said wonderingly, her hand going to her still flat stomach. "Oh, Harrison, I am scared and excited and so happy I could burst." "You are going to be an amazing mother," Harrison said, kissing her soundly. "And I am going to do everything in my power to be a good father. Our child is going to be so loved, Diana, so very loved." As Diana's pregnancy progressed, Harrison became almost comically protective. He would not let her lift anything heavy or work too hard. despite her protests that she was perfectly capable. He made sure she ate well and rested often, and at night he would lay his hand on her growing belly and talk to their baby, telling stories and singing old songs his own mother had sung to him long ago. Winter came again, and Diana grew round and radiant. The baby was active, kicking and moving constantly, and sometimes Harrison would just sit and watch in wonder as Diana's belly shifted and rolled with their child's movements. He had never imagined he could love someone as much as he loved Diana, but somehow his heart had expanded to make room for this new life they had created together. On a cold March morning, Diana went into labor. Harrison rode into town as fast as his horse could carry him to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Henderson, and then paced outside the bedroom door while the women worked. Diana's cries of pain nearly broke him, and he wanted desperately to be with her. But Mrs. Henderson firmly told him this was women's work and he needed to stay out of the way. It seemed like hours, though it was probably less, before he finally heard a new sound, the thin, reedy cry of a newborn baby. Harrison's heart leaped into his throat, and he waited impatiently for permission to enter. Finally, Mrs. Patterson, who had come to help, opened the door with a smile. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, strong boy, and Diana did wonderfully. She is tired but fine. Go meet your family, Harrison." Harrison walked into the bedroom on shaking legs. Diana was propped up in bed, sweaty and exhausted but glowing with joy. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets, and when Harrison came closer, he saw a small red face and a shock of dark hair. "Meet your son," Diana said softly, holding the baby out to him. Harrison took the baby with infinite care, cradling his son against his chest. The baby's eyes opened, dark blue and unfocused, and Harrison felt a love so fierce and overwhelming it nearly brought him to his knees. This was his child, his and Diana's, a perfect little person they had made together. "He is beautiful," Harrison whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "He is perfect, Diana, just perfect." "What should we name him?" Diana asked. They had discussed names, but somehow none of them had felt quite right. Now, looking at his son, Harrison knew. "Henry," he said. "Henry James Ingram, after my father and yours." Diana's eyes filled with tears. She had told Harrison once that she never knew her father, that James was just a name in the orphanage records. "Henry James," she repeated. "I love it. It is perfect." Young Henry was a good baby, content and healthy, with his mother's brown eyes and his father's strong build. Harrison adjusted to fatherhood with the same determination he brought to everything else, learning to change diapers and walk the floor when Henry was fussy. Diana was a natural mother, patient and loving, and watching her with their son made Harrison fall in love with her all over again. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Harrison hired a hand to help with the heavier work, a young man named Tom who was respectful and hardworking. This gave Harrison more time to spend with his family, which was all he really wanted. When Henry was 3, Diana told Harrison she was pregnant again. This time Harrison was calmer, knowing what to expect, though no less excited. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace Elizabeth, was born in the fall of 1891. She had Diana's delicate features and Harrison's green eyes, and both her parents doted on her shamelessly. Henry was fascinated by his baby sister and would sit by her cradle for hours, watching her sleep and chattering to her in his little boy voice. Diana would often find Harrison with both children, Grace in his arms and Henry on his knee, telling them stories about brave cowboys and beautiful princesses. Life was not without its challenges. There were harsh winters and dry summers, years when the cattle prices were low and money was tight. But Harrison and Diana faced everything together, their love and commitment only growing stronger with each trial they weathered. When Henry was 7 and Grace was 4, Harrison decided it was time to expand the house. Diana was pregnant again, their third child due in the spring, and they needed more room. Harrison and Tom spent the winter building an addition, 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Diana supervised and helped where she could, though Harrison still would not let her do anything too strenuous. Their third child was another boy, born during a late spring rainstorm. They named him Daniel Harrison Ingram, and he was the loudest of all their children, making his presence known from the moment he entered the world. Henry and Grace adored their new brother, fighting over who got to hold him and help take care of him. Harrison stood in the doorway of their home one evening, watching Diana with their 3 children gathered around her. She was reading them a story, Daniel in her lap and the older 2 pressed against her sides. Her voice was soft and gentle, full of love, and Harrison felt his heart swell with gratitude and joy. This was everything he had never known he wanted. A wife he loved more than life itself, children who filled his days with laughter and his nights with purpose, a home that was truly a home. And it had all started with a blizzard and a woman buried in the snow, reaching up from the cold with a hand that he had taken and never let go. Diana looked up and caught him watching, and she smiled that smile that still made his heart skip a beat even after all these years. "Come join us," she said. "I am just getting to the good part." Harrison crossed the room and sat down beside his family, pulling Grace onto his lap and putting his arm around Diana. Henry leaned against his side, and Diana shifted Daniel so Harrison could see the pictures in the book. They sat there together, a tangle of arms and legs and love, and Harrison thought he was the luckiest man alive. As the children grew, Harrison taught them everything he knew about ranching and the land. Henry was a natural horseman, fearless and skilled beyond his years. Grace was quieter but had a sharp mind for figures and kept the ranch books even as a young girl. Daniel was the wild one, always getting into mischief, but he had a huge heart and a laugh that could light up any room. Diana continued to be the heart of their family. She was the one the children ran to when they were hurt or scared, the one who kissed their scrapes and soothed their fears. She was Harrison's partner in every way, working beside him during the day and loving him at night, their passion for each other never dimming even as the years passed, and silver began to thread through their hair. The town of Randsburg grew too, becoming a proper town with a real school and a bank. Harrison was elected to the town council, and Diana volunteered at the church, teaching Sunday school and organizing charity drives for families in need. They were respected members of the community, known for their hard work and their devotion to each other and their children. When Henry turned 16, he started courting a girl from town, sweet Sarah Miller, whose father owned the general store. Harrison watched his son fumble through his first romance with amusement and sympathy, remembering his own nervousness with Diana. He gave Henry advice when asked, but mostly just let him figure it out, knowing that some lessons had to be learned firsthand. Grace grew into a beautiful young woman, smart and capable, with suitors starting to come around when she turned 15. Harrison was appropriately protective, vetting each young man who wanted to take his daughter for a walk or to a dance. Diana laughed at his overprotectiveness, but secretly appreciated it, wanting only the best for their daughter. Daniel was still young, only 11, but already showing signs of the man he would become. He was strong and kind, always helping neighbors without being asked, always looking out for those smaller or weaker than himself. Harrison saw so much of Diana in him, that same innate goodness and compassion. In the summer of 1899, when they had been married for 12 years, Harrison took Diana on a trip to Denver. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch and the children for more than a day, and Harrison wanted to give his wife a taste of luxury and excitement. They stayed in a real hotel, with running water and electric lights, and ate in fancy restaurants where the food was served on china plates. But Diana's favorite part was simply being alone with Harrison. They walked through the city streets hand in hand, visited museums and theaters, and at night they made love in their hotel room with the freedom of knowing the children would not interrupt. It reminded them both of their first days together, the intensity of their connection before the responsibilities of family life had taken over. "You ever regret it?" Diana asked one night as they lay together in the darkness. "Taking me in, I mean. Your life would have been simpler without me." Harrison propped himself up on one elbow to look at her. "Diana, finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions of life. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to wake up every morning with a smile. I have never regretted a single moment with you, not one." Diana reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the lines that time and sun had etched around his eyes. "I love you so much, Harrison, more now than even on the day we married. I did not think that was possible, but it is. My love for you just keeps growing." "Mine too," Harrison said, kissing her softly. "I will love you until my last breath, Diana, and beyond that if I can manage it." They returned to the ranch refreshed and even more in love if that was possible. The children were glad to have them home, full of stories about what had happened in their absence. Life settled back into its comfortable rhythms, the changing seasons marking the passage of time. Henry married Sarah Miller when he was 19, a beautiful wedding in the Randsburg church that had the whole town in attendance. They moved into a small house on the edge of Harrison and Diana's property, and Henry continued to work the ranch alongside his father. Within a year, they gave Harrison and Diana their first grandchild, a little girl named Emma who was the apple of everyone's eye. Grace surprised them all by announcing she wanted to be a teacher. She went to the normal school in Denver and came back with a certificate and a position at the Randsburg school. She boarded with Mrs. Patterson, now elderly but still running her boarding house, and taught the town's children with patience and skill. Daniel grew up to be as wild as Harrison had feared, but as good as Diana had believed. He had a way with horses that bordered on magical, and people came from all over the county to have him break their most difficult animals. He was also developing a reputation as something of a Romeo, breaking hearts all over Randsburg, though he swore he was just being friendly. Harrison and Diana watched their children become adults with pride and some sadness. Their house was quieter now, just the two of them most of the time, though the children and grandchildren visited often. Harrison found he did not mind. He had Diana all to himself again, and that was a gift in itself. They spent their evenings sitting on the porch Harrison had built years ago, watching the sun set over the mountains and talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes they would reminisce about the early days, about the blizzard and the line shack, and how far they had come since then. Other times they would talk about the future, about the grandchildren they hoped to meet and the places they might travel. "You remember what you said when you woke up in that cabin?" Harrison asked one evening. "After I found you in the snow," Diana smiled. "I said I had nowhere else to go." "You had nowhere else," Harrison repeated, "and now you have everywhere. You have a home and a family and a whole life." "I had nothing and I had everything all at the same time," Diana said softly, "because I had you. That has always been enough for me, Harrison. You are my home. You always have been." Harrison took her hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out one by one, lighting up the vast Colorado sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled and one of the horses whinnied in response. The night was cool but not cold, pleasant after the heat of the day. "I had a letter from Grace today," Diana said after a while. "She is being courted by the new banker in town, Mr. Thompson. She says he is very respectable and kind." "Do we like Mr. Thompson?" Harrison asked. "I think we do," Diana said thoughtfully. "He comes from a good family, and he treats Grace with respect. She seems genuinely fond of him." "Then I suppose I will have to give him my blessing if he asks," Harrison said with a sigh, "though I am not ready to give away my little girl just yet." Diana laughed. "Grace is 22, Harrison. She is hardly a little girl anymore." "She will always be my little girl," Harrison said stubbornly. "Just like Henry will always be my boy and Daniel will always be my wild child." "You are a good father," Diana said, squeezing his hand. "They are lucky to have you." "We are all lucky to have each other," Harrison corrected. As they predicted, Mr. Thompson did come to ask for Grace's hand, and Harrison gave his permission after a thorough interrogation that had Diana hiding her smile behind her hand. Grace was married in the spring of 1905, another beautiful wedding, and she moved with her husband to a nice house in town. She continued to teach for a while, but eventually retired when she became pregnant with her first child. Daniel, surprisingly, was the next to settle down. He met a girl named Lucy at a horse auction in Denver, a rancher's daughter with her own way with horses. They recognized kindred spirits in each other and were married within 6 months. Lucy fit into the family perfectly, and she and Diana became close friends despite the age difference. Harrison and Diana found themselves grandparents 4 times over by 1908. Henry and Sarah had 3 children now, Emma and 2 sons. Grace and Mr. Thompson, who everyone called James, had a daughter. The ranch echoed with children's laughter whenever everyone came to visit, which was often. Harrison was in his late 40s now, his dark hair liberally streaked with gray, but he was still strong and healthy. Diana was in her early 40s, and Harrison thought she was more beautiful now than ever. There was a serenity to her, a contentment that showed in every smile and every gentle touch. They had weathered storms together, literal and metaphorical. There had been the hard winter of 1902 when they lost half their herd, the drought of 1904 that nearly broke them, the influenza outbreak that swept through Randsburg in 1906, sparing their family but taking several of their friends. Through it all, they had clung to each other, their love the anchor that kept them steady. "You think we will have more grandchildren?" Diana asked one day as they watched Emma, now 7, help her grandfather feed the chickens. "Probably," Harrison said. "Henry and Sarah seem intent on populating the whole county, and I would not be surprised if Daniel and Lucy have some news soon. Lucy has been glowing lately." Diana smiled. "I love being a grandmother. I love watching our children become parents, seeing them with their babies and knowing that we did something right." "We did everything right," Harrison said firmly. "Look at them, Diana. Look at the life we built. 3 wonderful children who have become wonderful adults, grandchildren who are happy and healthy, a ranch that thrives, a community that respects us. We did more than right. We did something remarkable." Diana leaned her head on his shoulder. "We did it together." "Always together," Harrison agreed. In the summer of 1910, Randsburg celebrated its 30th anniversary as an incorporated town. There was a huge celebration planned, with speeches and a parade and a dance that would last until dawn. Harrison and Diana were asked to speak, as 2 of the town's most respected long-time residents. Harrison was nervous about public speaking, but Diana encouraged him. "Just tell them our story," she said. "Tell them how we met and how we built our life here. People love a good love story." So on the day of the celebration, Harrison stood on the platform that had been erected in the town square, Diana by his side, and told their story. He told about the blizzard and finding Diana buried in the snow, her hand reaching up as if asking for help. He told about the line shack and the 3 days they spent there, getting to know each other. He told about bringing her to Randsburg and how she had worked at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. "And then I did the smartest thing I have ever done in my life," Harrison said, looking at Diana with all the love in his heart. "I told her I loved her, and I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. That was 23 years ago, and every single day since has been a gift. Diana gave me everything: a home, a family, a purpose. She turned a lonely cowboy into the happiest man in Colorado." Diana was crying openly now, and so were many of the women in the crowd. Even some of the men had suspiciously bright eyes. Harrison helped Diana to her feet, and she spoke too, her voice soft but clear. "Harrison saved my life," she said simply. "But more than that, he gave me a life worth living. He gave me hope when I had none, a home when I was homeless, love when I thought I would never be loved. He is the best man I have ever known, and I thank God every day for that blizzard that brought us together. Randsburg is our home because Harrison made it so, and I could not imagine living anywhere else or with anyone else." The crowd erupted in applause, and Harrison pulled Diana into his arms and kissed her right there in front of everyone. The townspeople cheered and whistled, delighted by the display of affection from the couple they all admired. The celebration continued long into the night. Harrison and Diana danced together just as they had at that first social 23 years ago, moving together with the ease of long familiarity. Their children and grandchildren danced too, and Harrison felt a deep satisfaction knowing that the legacy he and Diana were building would continue long after they were gone. As they grew older, Harrison and Diana gradually stepped back from the day-to-day running of the ranch. Henry took over more and more of the responsibilities, proving himself a capable manager. This gave Harrison and Diana time to enjoy their grandchildren and each other, to travel a little and see more of the country they had spent their lives building. They went back to Texas, so Harrison could show Diana where he grew up. They visited Kansas City, so Diana could see the orphanage where she had spent her childhood, now torn down and replaced by a factory, but she wanted to see anyway. They went to the ocean for the first time, standing on the California coast and watching the waves roll in, amazed by the vastness of the water. But they always came back to Randsburg, to their ranch and their family. This was where they belonged, where their roots ran deep into the Colorado soil. This was home. In 1918, the world was at war, and young men from Randsburg were being called up to serve. Harrison and Diana's oldest grandson, Emma's husband, enlisted in the army and went overseas to fight. It was a terrifying time, and the whole family prayed for his safe return. He came back in 1919, changed but alive, and Harrison and Diana wept with relief and gratitude. The years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and holidays, weddings and funerals, births and deaths. Mrs. Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1920, and Diana wept for the woman who had given her a chance all those years ago. Tom, their longtime ranch hand, retired and moved to Denver to live with his daughter. New people came and old friends departed, the natural cycle of life continuing as it always did. Harrison and Diana celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1927 with a huge party attended by what seemed like half the county. They renewed their vows in the same church where they had been married, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren. Harrison was 68 now, his hair completely gray, but his love for Diana burned as bright as ever. Diana was 62, and Harrison still thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. 40 years, Diana said wonderingly that night as they lay in bed together. It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all. I would live it all again, Harrison said. Every moment, every joy, every sorrow, as long as I got to live it with you. We have been blessed, Diana said softly, so very blessed. Yes, Harrison agreed, pulling her close. We have. They lived to see their great-grandchildren grow, to see the ranch continue to thrive under Henry's management, and eventually under Emma's son, who had a passion for ranching that rivaled Harrison's own. They saw Randsburg grow from a small mining town into a proper city, with paved roads and automobiles and all the modern conveniences. But through all the changes, one thing remained constant: Harrison and Diana's love for each other. They were rarely apart, still holding hands when they walked, still stealing kisses when they thought no one was looking. The grandchildren would giggle and the great-grandchildren would make faces, but everyone knew that Harrison and Diana were the standard by which all love should be measured. Harrison passed away peacefully in 1935 at the age of 76, with Diana holding his hand. He died as he had lived, surrounded by family, in the home he had built with his own two hands. His last words were, "I love you, Diana. Always have, always will." Diana was heartbroken but not bitter. She had been given 48 years with the love of her life, and she was grateful for every single moment. She lived on at the ranch, cared for by her children and grandchildren, and she spoke often of Harrison, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had never known him. She told them the story of how they met, about the blizzard and the snowdrift and the hand reaching up from the cold. She told them about the line shack and the wedding and the early days of their marriage. She told them about the love that had sustained her through everything, the love that still sustained her even though Harrison was gone. Diana lived for another 5 years, passing away quietly in her sleep in 1940 at the age of 74. She was buried next to Harrison in the Randsburg cemetery, under a cottonwood tree with a view of the mountains they had both loved. The whole town turned out for her funeral, paying their respects to a woman who had been a pillar of the community for over 50 years. On their shared headstone, their children had inscribed a simple message: Harrison and Diana Ingram, together in life, together in death, together in love forever. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, each new owner adding their own touch, but always respecting the legacy that Harrison and Diana had built. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. It became a reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places, that kindness and courage could change lives, that two people who had nothing could build everything together. Emma, who lived to be 92, would often sit on the porch of the old ranch house and tell her great-great-grandchildren about their ancestors. She would describe her grandfather Harrison, with his quiet strength and his deep love for his family. She would talk about her grandmother Diana, with her gentle spirit and her unwavering faith in the goodness of people. They loved each other more than anything, Emma would say. From the moment he pulled her from that snowdrift until the day he died, and even beyond that. Grandma Diana used to say that Grandpa Harrison saved her life that day in the blizzard, but Grandpa Harrison always said that she saved his. They saved each other, really, and they built something beautiful together. This ranch, our family, all of it came from their love. The children would listen wide-eyed, captivated by the romance and the drama of it all. And then they would run off to play, but the story stayed with them, became part of who they were. They grew up knowing that they came from love, that they were the legacy of two people who had found each other against all odds and had refused to let go. And so the love story of Harrison and Diana lived on, generation after generation, a testament to the enduring power of love, hope, and the courage to reach out even when buried in the deepest cold. It all began with a hand in the snow and a man who chose to stop and help, and it became something far greater than either of them could have imagined. A family, a legacy, a love that truly would last forever. The ranch itself became a symbol in the family of what was possible when two people worked together toward a common goal. The house that Harrison had built with his own hands, expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family, still stood strong over a century later. The descendants of the cattle and horses that Harrison and Diana had raised still grazed in the mountain meadows. The land they had worked so hard to tame and nurture continued to provide for their children and their children's children. In the town of Randsburg, now a bustling small city, there was a historical marker placed in front of what had once been Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. It told the story of Diana Owens, who came to Randsburg with nothing and helped build one of the area's most successful ranching families. School children on field trips would read the marker and learn about the woman who had embodied the spirit of the American West, resilient, hardworking, and full of hope. But for the family, Harrison and Diana were more than historical figures. They were grandpa and grandma, the foundation upon which everything else was built. Their love story was not just a tale of romance, but a blueprint for how to live. With courage, with kindness, with unwavering commitment to the people you love. The blizzard of 1887 that had nearly claimed Diana's life became instead the beginning of life, the storm that brought two souls together who were meant to be one. And from that terrible cold came the warmth of a love that heated generations, a fire that still burned bright in the hearts of all who came after. Harrison and Diana's story was proof that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes, that help can come from unexpected places, that saying, "I have nowhere else," can be the first step toward finding home. Their legacy was not just land or money or even family, though all of those were important. Their true legacy was the love they shared and the example they set, showing everyone who came after that true love was real, that it could last a lifetime and beyond, and that it was always, always worth fighting for. And so their story ended as all the best stories do, with love triumphant, with family gathered close, with a life well lived and a love that would never die. Harrison had pulled Diana from the snow that long ago winter day, but she had pulled him out of loneliness and into the light. Together they had built something that would outlast them both, something that would carry on long after they were gone. A love story for the ages, born in the Wild West and living forever in the hearts of all who knew them.